Hello, hello. Testing, testing. All right, cool. So I think we are live. Sorry about the silence there. All good. Alrighty. So how's everyone going? Thanks for joining in. Today is gonna be a rather quick or a short stream because I gotta go. But hopefully we have like a good hour to work on good stuff. So let me just double check. All right, perfect. Cool. So I have the chat next to me, the chat box. So if you have any questions or anything, feel free to put them in there, and I'll cover whatever I can. So I'm gonna start by continuing with the creature, this weird thing that we started last stream. This is, it's pretty abstract, but it kind of looks like a creature's head. So I'm just gonna give it some body and hopefully show you a bunch of different techniques as well that you can utilize in your own projects. So I'm gonna start with actually let's assign a material. This is something that we did last stream as well. I just talked about how to combine different materials in ZBrush and using the the BPR render to blend those materials at render time. But I'm just gonna go ahead and fill it with selected material and fill it with the normal basic material. And yeah, I should do the same with the other one. Yeah, all good. This is something we did last time, but not sure if it works. I kept it there, but I don't know. In fact, I don't know if I'm still deciding whether or not to keep those connections. Yeah. Anyway, so this is what we have right now, like a weird looking creature. So what I'll do is to balance out the design. I'm gonna give it a pretty plain body, or something that's that gives a good contrast and sort of frames the entire composition. Like if you think the character as a composition, it will frame it all together. So yeah, let's do that. And I'm gonna keep it simple. So I reckon we can do C-sphere. So I'm just gonna append a C-sphere. There we go, and make sure I have symmetry enabled. I'm gonna select the move tool, push that down. And when you work with C-spheres, or at least when you create characters in using C-spheres, like let's say a full body character, the best way, or my suggestion is to start with a C-sphere right in the middle, like in the hips of the character, because C-spheres work with a hierarchy. So that means that you can create two different chains that are disconnected or are connected to just that joint. So that means that if you start from the head and then you want to rotate something around the, I don't know, the shoulders or the torso, it's also gonna rotate the legs. Whereas if you start with something in the middle, you have like those two chains, like whatever is below the waist and above the waist, like kind of like disconnected in a way, so you have more control of it. So yeah, let's go ahead and move that down. I'm gonna scale it up, and I'm gonna go into solo mode. We don't need to see this just now. And with the draw mode, with symmetry enabled, I'm gonna add a new sphere at the bottom and at the top. So this is what I meant about splitting the two chains in a way. So this is gonna be for the, for the torso. Let's do another one for the neck, just so we have it there. And I don't think we'll see the legs anyway, but just in case, let's add a couple there. And same thing with the arms. So I'm just gonna create the shoulders, which are gonna be pretty extreme. And we can play around with this, with position and all of that. So that's why I really like the C-spheres for this type of stuff. So it's gonna be a rather long body, and I can click in between the C-spheres just to add a few more, so we can play around with more curvature, I suppose. You won't see the legs anyway. I'm planning to do some kind of like a plain robe, so we can play with drapery and or at least with the dynamics, which is gonna be pretty cool. All right, but I think what I wanna emphasize here are the shoulders, some kind of like weird shoulder pads or something, and long arms. All right, I think as a frame this works, and of course we have to play around with the scale, but we have something that kind of works already, which is, it's always good to start with. Let me see the chat. Like a root bone in a rig. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That's what I meant about the hierarchy. So if I go ahead and rotate something from the hips, it's only going to affect the bottom part and vice versa, right? It's only going to affect the top part. Whereas if I start from the root, from the foot, or from a foot, or the head, it's just going to obviously affect everything else. Cool, just finished your creature workshop yesterday, Lancelot. Awesome. Really, really, really glad to hear that. Awesome. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, recently, like maybe 2 weeks ago, I released this creature workshop. So this thing that you'll see on the other side of the screen, and that's on the 3D Concept Artist 3D Concept Artist website, where you can basically join in, and it's a 5-day program, so it's super intense, but it's jam packed with a whole bunch of different techniques, and it has a very structured process to create like a creature concept. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, and by the way, it only requires ZBrush and Photoshop, so all the rendering and everything is done within ZBrush and with Photoshop to put it all together. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, that's a good place to start. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to convert this thing into something that I can actually use. Let's go with that sphere selected. Let's go to adaptive skin, and we can make it straight away a Dynamesh, but I like to be able to block it out a lot easier with less polygons. So by default, if you just click on preview, this is what you're going to get, and it's just a Dynamesh object, right? But I don't want that. What I want to do is remove Dynamesh, and by setting this slider to 0, then when you create this preview, what you're going to get is a more like the subdivision approach. You can determine the density with this slider right here, and the density just means how many levels of subdivision you're gonna end up with. So yeah, I think 2 is fine. So I'm gonna click on, but you can do more if you want. I'm gonna click on Make Adaptive Skin. Now ZBrush, when you create an adaptive skin, it's gonna create a separate mesh or a separate tool. I'm gonna copy that, and I'm gonna bring it in here, and we can take the C-spheres and just put it into the original folder. So now we have a mesh that we can actually play around with. So I'm going to use the move brush, and I'm going to use the AccuCurve as well. So I have symmetry enabled, and I can just start playing around with this. So what I want to do is fill some of the space, and to be honest, I'm not going to work on the body much. All I want to do is have some kind of blocking that works well overall with the entire composition of the character, and then I'm just going to cover it with a cloak or something. But it's it's probably not going to even have much of a neck anyway. Thanks, Valentina. That's great to hear. I'm not sure which course you're talking about. I'm sure. So if you're not scared about ZBrush, I suppose this is the ultimate ZBrush guide course, hopefully. Hey Steven, how you doing, man? Yeah, I'm using the Space Mouse. I mean, I use it kind of like sometimes for this type of things. I think it's just a lot easier just to block things out. But yeah, so it's the same thing for me really. I'm used to either do this now it took me a while to sort of get used to it properly and really take advantage of the mouse itself. But once you learn how to move things around, it's like super easy to just find, you know, the spots that you want to play around with. So it's really fast in that sense. But I also have this controller from the Cintiq, so you know it's pretty much the same thing. It's just it saves a few clicks, and overall the experience of looking at your model rotating a little bit smoother. I think it's nicer. But yeah, you can achieve the same thing. All right. So I think I'm happy with this as a starting point, just to block the rest. So what I'll do is maybe subdivide this a couple more times, and then do the clay polish. So pretty horrible body, but like I said, I'm not gonna be able to see much of this. But what I want to do is play around with some volumes. So I'm gonna use the inflate brush. Oops, that's too big of a brush. If something like that happens to you, just check the size of your brush. So if you go to all the way to 1000 in this case, and if I press, you see it just does it to the entire body, and that is because of the size of the brush. It should be similar if you go to 1. Not in this case, but yeah, if you go to the maximum amount, that's what happens. So I just want to add a bit more volume. But yeah, the rest, I think it's fine. Cool. So let's get out of solo mode, and now we can start playing around with the scale of this. So it's gonna be a pretty big head anyway. And we can use the move brush to start, you know, trying to make sure that kind of like the lines of the body are in line with that's kind of like a weird thing to say, but that the lines of the body, the lines of actions are in line with the lines of the head. Right, so I'm just trying to go for like that sort of similar spikiness type of thing. All right, so of course the body is horrible at this point, but we're gonna use you know, a couple of nice techniques to create some drapery and build something interesting, something a bit more interesting at least. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna turn off the head, and let's do a quick save as well. What Cintiq am I using? I'm using the Cintiq 24-inch Pro Touch. I think that's the name. So it's 24 inches the size, and it's touch, and it has the Pro name in it. That's it. So I can turn on the touch controls, and I can actually rotate with my hands if I wanted to, which is not something that I use at all. I actually don't use the touchscreen for anything really, except there's a cool technique actually. I won't be able to show you because it's on a second monitor, but you can actually map the touchscreen capability of the Cintiq to a different monitor. So let's say if I'm working on you know, creating a concept or a character or something, and I'm actually sculpting in ZBrush. Obviously, when I'm sculpting with ZBrush, the Cintiq will recognize that I'm using the pen, right? So I can just, you know, do the usual thing, pretty much what I'm doing right now. But I can have a set of references, maybe PureRef or Photoshop or whatever, on a separate screen, and I can map the touchscreen of the Cintiq to a different monitor. So all I have to do is, you know, work on the Cintiq to create the sculpting, and then using the hand basically to zoom in and out and move. So I can just use the touch controls to move a different screen. That's a pretty neat trick. Maybe I can do a tutorial about it. I just need to, you know, film the actual setup, because otherwise you won't see the how cool that is. Hey man, you recently did the Ultimate ZBrush Guide course. Awesome, that's great to hear. So the UCG, or Ultimate ZBrush Guide course, is aimed for absolute beginners, in case you didn't know, and it's another course from the 3D Concept Artist website. And yeah, it's a project that took me about 3 years to develop. I keep changing things, just trying to find the right methodology that creates a learning experience that you will, you'll be satisfied with. As in, sometimes as a newcomer, ZBrush could be a bit intimidating, but in the way that we set it up in that course is actually quite fun to learn. When I'm going to do the live feedback on the creature workshop, so that, you should have got an email about it. I'm going to send another one later on. I'm just giving it some time for everyone that joined the creature workshop to actually produce something, and we can do the feedback later on. But it's coming. You'll get an email with that as well. And if you haven't, just check your inbox or spam, but it should be there. Shane, well, I suppose that maybe maybe in YouTube I'm still on the Shane, which is fine. All right. Yeah, no worries. All right, so let's go ahead and take this weird blob and let's go ahead and create the some kind of a cloak or something. So I'm gonna use a bunch of tools. Hopefully the techniques are helpful. So I'm gonna append a plain 3D, and let's have a look. I'm gonna turn on the skin or change the material. I'm gonna scale these like so. All right, so I'm just trying to think about what would be the best way to approach this, and I think I'm just gonna keep it simple so we can work with multiple subtools anyway. All right, so I'm just gonna scale this up quite a bit. So this is gonna be the back, kind of like the front and the back of this cloak. And we can go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. And we're just gonna drop this on top of the body. And I think this is gonna be kind of like the starting point. Yeah, but we can do a couple of things as well just to make it more interesting. For instance, you can take the hold Control and Shift, and let's go ahead and take the slice circle, and let's just slice. Oops. Something like that. I think that's maybe too big. Hang on. From the top. All right, something like that. And then I'm just gonna hide that. Sorry, not that one. Let's undo that. So hide this circle that I created with this slice. I'm gonna delete hidden, and I'm gonna remesh everything with maybe, yeah, I think it's fine, and symmetry enable. Oh, there was a weird thing in there. Anyway, let's do a couple. Just gonna create a more better circle here, just to give the Siri measure some help. And that's just with the move brush, nothing fancy here. All right, so you see something a bit better. You can just keep remeshing with the adaptive on, and if you don't change the amount of target polygons, you should be able to get a similar amount of polygons and a different kind of like distribution if you give the Siri measure some help. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and push that one down a bit. All right, and we can go ahead and bring in the dynamics, drop that on the right hand side, and I'm gonna click on collision volume. So that's going to analyze the visible subtools so that we can, run the simulation, and this actually collides with that block out of the body. Let's just run it as it is. It's probably a bit too fast, but that's basically what I want to generate. All right, so let's undo that. So a couple of things that we can do. Maybe we can subdivide one more time, delete lower, just so we have more resolution. It's gonna take a little bit more time to simulate, but it's fine. And in fact, let's just make it smaller because I think I went too crazy with the size. And we can just scale it like so. All right. Let me adjust that area here for the neck. Cool. So a couple of things, like I said, that we can do with the dynamics. So the first one is the iteration, the simulation iteration. So right now it's 100. I like to set this to something like 250. That's just ultimately gonna increase the quality, kind of like the resolution of like how good the simulation it is or how accurate. The firmness is how firm that piece of cloth would be if it is a piece of cloth. So you know, if we set it to 1 and we just run it, we just go a little bit further away, you'll see how things are going to start stretching because it's going to make it like feel very, you know, not as firm. So basically all of these, you see, it started to stretch things out. So let's escape that. And it's very obvious here on the neck. So if I enable, or if I move to maybe firm 3 and run the simulation, Siri is going to try to maintain the overall consistency of it's going to be more consistent, the shape of the volume in a way. So the shape obviously is going to change, but the amount of mass that is in this cloak is going to be more consistent. All right, so all of that is looking better. I'm going to push this back a bit. There we go. But the other thing we can play around with the collision distance, and at the moment everything seems, you know, pretty good to me. So I'm just gonna run the simulation and let it rest up, as in wait until everything is fully simulated, and this is gonna be the starting point of that, of, you know, whatever this is going to be, which I'm not sure exactly what it's going to end up looking like. Oh no, sorry, I stopped it. I have to do it again. And it doesn't have to be like a single-sided mesh, right? We can use something like the thickness, the dynamic thickness, or we can just, you know, merge a couple of things and redynamesh this whole thing. The point is just to simulate something that looks interesting. All right, I think we're getting there. All right, stop it there. Cool. So, I mean, it's not great. We could have done that just with a cube, but we can do a few things. We can bring in the transform cloth. And that one is, let me just find it here, transpose cloth. And that actually is going to transpose or move that cloth with simulations enabled. And because we already we already clicked on this collision volume, we already have the volumes that this piece of cloth is going to be colliding with. So I can just push this down. You see, it just sort of reacts to that volume. Or I can push this back, and it's like sliding through the mesh, right? So I can use this as well to scale it this way. And this is what I wanted to do, kind of like a compress of those things to get some of the, maybe some weird sleeves or something like that. All right, so that's looking all right. You can scale it this way as well. Cool. So that's just like using that transpose line and makes it look quite interesting. And of course, we can adjust it. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to the basic material. So we have something that looks all right. Let's see with the dynamic on. Yeah, I'm gonna smooth this a bit. I wanna keep everything super simple, like just a bunch of straight lines, and that is again just to maintain a nice contrast between these and the complicated or detail head that we have, right? All right, so let me just think about it. In terms of the design, I think it works. What I'll do is maybe create some kind of additional mesh. Let me see the head as well. Yeah, so I think that is working. But what I can do is duplicate that body, right? Let's go into solo mode. And I want to make use, I was going to actually simulate something with the sleeves, but I think we can just reutilize this mesh, yeah, and just work with it. So one thing we can do is isolate these parts. So just the arms. Oops, make sure I duplicate that before anything. All right, so I'm gonna isolate the arms, and those polygroups come from the C-spheres. So when you create the C-spheres, each section of the C-sphere is gonna create its own polygroup, so it's a lot easier to do this type of thing. I'm gonna invert that selection, and I'm gonna delete hidden. Oops, let's delete lower, delete hidden. Actually, let's go back because we have subdivision levels already, and this one is quite decent in terms of the amount of topology. So let's set it to 3 and delete there. All right, let's give it a single polygroup. And let's use maybe the inflate brush just to add more volume, especially towards the bottom. Alrighty. So those are gonna be kind of like the sleeves. And what we can do maybe is, let's go ahead and run a zero mesher with the same amount of polygons. So we're gonna have around 10,000, well, 20,000 in this case. And I think that's plenty. We can run a pretty clean and nice simulation on these pieces just with that. And for that, let's go ahead and jump to a different material so it's a little bit easier to see. Let's go to dynamics, and I'm gonna recalculate so that it sort of collides with a bunch of other stuff, although you won't probably see any of that. Smooth these. And we can use some of the brushes. So let's try something like the cloth notch. So this one is gonna be, oops, let's actually turn off this. So this one is going to be, give you this effect, which is kind of cool. So just nudging the clothing to generate those folds. And if there are maybe too large for you, like the folds, you want to create something a bit more subtle, what we can do is smooth some of these as well. What we can do is either increase the amount of polygons that we are actually simulating. So I can do maybe 80,000, right? And that already changes the size of the, of these wrinkles. But we can also remove or change the firmness, right? So we can change that to 1, and now that's going to be pretty tiny. If you want to do something weird like that, or if you set it to 6, it's going to be actually pretty hard to see the folds because it's just changing the actual structure of the material. So I think value of 2 is fine. That creates the nice set of X and Y folds in there. And maybe increase the firmness to 4 and just play around with the larger folds here towards the bottom. All right, it's not bad. Another thing that I like to do, actually, I think we didn't delete those pieces. So let's remove lower and delete hidden. I'm not too worried about losing like subdivision or anything like that. We can just, if we wanted to, remesh this and then project back everything. So not fussed about it. Let's use the move brush to push this down a bit. And what I like to do as well is to clip this area or to remove the bottom area. So for that, I'm going to use the knife brushes, and they work with symmetries, which is great. So let's remove that part already. I think that maybe something a bit more straight from this angle. Yeah, there we go. And of course, that creates its own polygroup with nice geometry, so we can just hold Control and Shift to isolate those. And let's check at the top. Yep, we can go ahead and delete that. So ultimately, what we have now is just a kind of like an empty cylinder. And we can go ahead and do dynamics of division, which is going to give us the nice smoothness of that piece. And we can also increase the thickness, which is going to kind of like inflate everything a bit, and that's going to help with the effect. And that, for you guys, that's under the geometry, dynamics of division. So those are the controls that I have here at the bottom of my kind of like camera here in the streams. And yeah, so with the thickness, we can play around with that, sort of how much compression of the mesh you want to get, like they inflate ultimately, and you see the thickness at the top. But we can change these, right? So if you want to have the thickness, to keep the thickness as this much, but you don't want to compress or you don't want to inflate everything, you can just change the offset. So if I set the offset to -100, we're going to keep exactly what we have originally, and then just have that amount of thickness. But I think I don't like that much of a thickness, but I do want to inflate some of those bits. So maybe 0.02, 0.02. There we go. So that's a nice setting. And if we go here, of course, this doesn't look great because of the knife brush. So I just wanted to test this out, but now we can go ahead and clean this up a bit more. And the way that we can do that is, duplicating this mesh, running a series mesher, projecting these details so that we can keep everything, and then now we have subdivision levels. So one thing I like to do is create, let's see. Actually, now that I think of, instead of using that, sorry, I just thought about something else. Oh no, never mind. Thought we had a cleaner set of loops in there. But anyway, so I can use this dyna to subd. This is a custom macro that I created myself, which goes through the process of doing exactly what I mentioned, but automatically. So it freezes the subdivision level. It does the redyna meshing. The remeshing of the series meshing. Then it takes the original details from the high-res mesh and projects them back. So all of that, it happens automatically with a single click. So now what I end up with is a cleaner topology, right, that takes into account those folds, and it also has the subdivision level. And if you look at here at the bottom, now we have a nice set of edges, which is great. So we can actually do without the high subdivision level. So I'm going to delete that. So we have a clean mesh, and let's go ahead and enable dynamic subdivision. And now we can do the same thing, exactly the same thing, maybe now a bit less thickness. But if we look at the bottom, right, this is a pretty clean mesh, right? And if I don't like to have it, that when I'm working with clothing and fabric, it's pretty rare that you get like this sharp edge anyway, or like as sharp. So what we can do is turn off this post subdivision, and that gives us a much smoother border. And we can play with the segments, and that's kind of like to sharpen it up a little bit. So the segments are actually giving additional loops in here. So let me just show you. So in that thickness, in that border, if we enable segments, it's just adding multiple loops in there, which in turn is going to make it a bit sharper. But I think I like it as it is. Alrighty, so that's pretty easy. Not much work there. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one, right? So I can go ahead and let's see. We can enable dynamic just to see how this is looking. And in fact, Let's go ahead and subdivide it one more time again. Enable dynamic. And maybe add a bit of thickness as well. Turn off post subdivision. Make this one a little bit thicker. All right, so what I have here and what I did there was to subdivide the mesh. So let me just turn off dynamic. So this is what we had, right? Pretty basic mesh that we just dropped on top. If we increase the subdivision, we have now a new set of, like a new subdivision level. So now we have 16,000 polygons. And then on top of that, I want to bring in dynamic so that I can see this a bit smoother. But I don't want to, so I want to be able to see this in a smoother version of it. And I want to have thickness. That's why I enabled dynamic. But I don't want to actually create the next subdivision level. So I want to keep the subdivision dynamic just so that we can, you know, the lower the amount of polygons you have, the faster the simulations would be with whatever you use. So I kind of like this one as it is, but obviously we can do it better. So I'm going to duplicate that, keep that as an original there in case I don't like what I have. And let's go ahead and bring in, yeah, maybe the cloth notch. This is a fantastic brush to do this type of thing. Actually, make sure that, yeah, it's disabled. Remove the firmness a bit. So I'm just pulling and pushing the cloth, obviously, and also using the smooth brush. But one thing to keep in mind is that I'm sort of like moving things around, trying to maintain a clear angle, let's say, with the tension points, or trying to do the movements thinking about the tension points. And what I mean by that is that the shoulders in this case and the neck in general, those are creating these tension points. So the wrinkles and the drapery is going to start from that point. It's going to create some pretty straight lines as well. So this could be, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, fabric. You know, this could be some weird stuff that we can do. In the last 25 minutes I have today. Where can I get the dyna to sub D? Do you sell it? Oh, no. I can show you how to do it. It's just a custom macro. And it might not work for your workflow. For me, it kind of does. So you can basically follow the set of steps, recording them as a macro, and then just convert that into a button. It's like super easy. And another is let me just show you how to create it. Very quickly. Oops. I still have the move cloth. There we go. So I'm gonna dynamesh this. Right, so you have a dynamesh object, right? And you can start playing around with all of these, redynamesh, and make sure that, you know, everything is working. So let's say that this is your sketch. And if you want to create that dyna to sub D, all you have to do is maybe add a bit more resolution just so that we can keep some details so you can see. Let's do damn standard brush. Right, so we have this dynamesh sketch, and you want to convert it into a quick simplified mesh. So all you have to start recording, let's say if I were to create a macro again, all you have to do that is from this point onwards, go to geometry. Yeah, so go to geometry here, and I'm gonna divide it once. You can do it more than once. I'm just trying to remember exactly the steps so that I don't do any extra things that you might not need. So take that dynamesh mesh, you divide it one time, and dividing it is just gonna obviously increase the amount of polygons, but it's gonna create this subdivision level. So that's what you need. Once you have that, you can do it another time. Again, I might not, you know, recalling exactly what I did, but you might just do another one. So let me just start from the beginning. You have your dynamesh, you go to the geometry, divide it once, and now that you have multiple subdivision levels, or at least two, you can go to free subdivision levels. So now ZBrush is going to remember that state of the high resolution mesh, right? Or that second subdivision level. And now we can go to half, for example, in the zero measure and do kind of like this. So we just do the remeshing. So you can save that process as well in a macro. So all of the clicks that I'm doing all can be saved in a macro. So you can see now this is a nicer topology. If anything, you can just do it twice. If you do it twice, that's obviously gonna be recorded twice in that macro, or 3 times, whatever, how many times you want to do it or how many times you want to change that. And you can also determine the target polygon count. So you can go to the zero measure and say, instead of doing half, you can just have a target polygon count, and that's every time that you do this macro, it's going to try to target that. Again, anyway, so once you have this, you can just click on freeze the subdivision levels. So ZBrush is going to bring back that second subdivision level that you had, and literally with those details, and it's going to project them back into the model, right? And that's it. You can divide. Oops, let's clear that mask. Subdivide. So now you have pretty much what you had before, but now you have subdivision levels and you have a clean mesh. So all of those points that I clicked, you can turn that into a macro. That's exactly what I have here in Dyna to subd. And it works for my workflow, might not work for yours. So that's what I'm saying. Alrighty. So I think this is looking all right. What I'll do is I'm gonna fix this a bit more. So I'm gonna bring in the mask lasso. And I'm just rushing things a bit because I want to show you the end of this before I have to go. I'm just going to push that in a bit. And at this point, maybe this is too symmetrical now, but at this point we can go ahead and start thinking about how this whole thing integrates with that weird head. And again, it might not be like a full-on, we can remove that that body that we had. I mean, I had it off anyway. I think I'm just going to push this like so. Create kind of like a, I don't know. I'm not sure. Just looking at the overall shapes of the design. All right, so let's see how we can integrate this face or this head with that body. I want to make sure that there's no weird intersections or anything like that. Alrighty. So I'm gonna bring in something like this, this custom Geiger brush. In fact, let's turn off dynamic or apply dynamic. Actually, I'm happy with the amount of polygons we have in here, and I'm just gonna make sure. Cool. So we have about 10 minutes left before I gotta go. So I'm gonna use this to just refine this a bit more manually. Let's do more subdivision levels. And I'm just using the clay brush to add more volume here. Kind of like as in, this is part of the, this is the clavicle or something that's underneath this cloak. But now that I have this, I sort of like determine what the points of tension are. I can bring something like the normal standard brush, for instance, and then start playing with that sort of drapery effect a bit more. And also I'm going to use the smooth stronger now that I have more resolution. and this is the, I mean, the dynamics are fantastic, and it gives you a pretty good starting point, but I do like to go manually and refine things. Even if you use something a bit more specific for this type of things, like Marvelous Designer or something that is, a dedicated software for simulating clothing, right, and create the garments and all of that. When you bring it into ZBrush, you can do a lot more of, manual refinements and cleanup. So this would be the equivalent, what I'm doing right now, just to sharpen those lines. And I quite like the fact that it's symmetrical, but that's kind of like the thing. So now this is a weird overlord type of thing, which is, I think, is looking all right. And let's go ahead and do a couple more details in here that might look all right, might look good. So I'm gonna bring in a custom brush. Probably you guys have seen this type of brushes now floating around, the Geiger and Beksinski pack. That's a pack of brushes that I released recently, and we can use some of these tools. So either this one or quite like, let's see where it is. The membrane control creates this weird looking pattern. Maybe that's not the one I want. I'm just trying to decide what type of texture I want to have in this guy. Just gonna use the bumps with a lash brush. No, I'm not sure. I want to keep things very clean here. That's the only issue. So you know what? I think I'm gonna keep it simple, like as it is right now. I kind of like the simplicity of the mesh. Maybe just add some more organic lines in here. And I'm gonna use the back facing now that I have thickness, of course. And these are just some kind of simple details to merge into the design. And I think they go with the kind of like the top of the head, what we did. So that's the reason I'm adding this in this area, and I'm gonna try to fade them into the rest of the body so that not everything is detail. So it sort of fades, all of these details, they fade into a more plain surface. And I'm just using the smooth brush just to integrate this a bit more. But yeah, keeping it simple, I think it works. Maybe take the sleeves. I'm gonna apply the effect, and let's see. Just wanna test out whether or not I should add some of these lines as well. With the same principle, maybe just add a bit of surface noise and visual interest towards the top, and then fade it into a more plain area. Yeah, I think that works. And just to refine it, I'm going to use another brush from the Geiger pack. This is just a super strong. You can do the same thing with a stronger /3 or a stronger damp standard brush. What I'm going to do now, which is kind of like pushing this like so. So I like to use these brushes to sharpen up these type of details. And let's do the same thing here. I'm gonna subdivide one more time. So now, oops, no, I have 2 million polygons. I think that's fine. Probably don't need more than that anyway. All right, so we're coming to an end with this creature and for today's stream. But yeah, hopefully these few techniques that I show you are helpful. There's a very particular style, I suppose. You know, it's kind of like a creepy, but like kind of like a high fashion creature type of thing. I don't know if there is a term for it or an actual style, but that's what I'm calling it. And perhaps, you know what, let's just get out of symmetry and I'm just gonna push this line here in the middle. In fact, let's use one of the brushes that I loaded before, this one. Nope. Yeah, let's use that one. Trying to find like a good match for these details. I think I tend to overdo it or like do too many things at once. So I'm just gonna keep it simple and do just a line without symmetry going all the way down. And just maybe a couple more here just to make it interesting. Right, so that sort of feels like it's cutting up the garment in there. And we can go a little bit more kind of like fashion designing things. I don't know. Probably not ideal for this type of thing, but I think it just gives it an extra layer of intentionality. I think that's the easiest way to put it. So that it feels like this is not just an organic thing, but it's kind of like a mix between a garment or something that was designed or created for this specific creature, and it has a purpose, which I think is cool. All right, so I can do the same thing with this. Maybe extend one of those lines all the way down. Kind of like the sewing pattern. Cool. Yeah, I think that works. Obviously, we might have to work a bit more on the actual head, just refining some of these details. But I think that works as it is, and it could be, you know, let's go to the move brush just to wrap it up, and I'm gonna go to the lowest subdivision level with symmetry, and I'm just gonna play around with this. Again, just trying to avoid any intersection. All right. And again, let's do a quick save. And to wrap things up, we can bring in, I do have, so this is a pack as well that I created to, it was like a joint effort with some of the ZBrush live streamers as well. And I'm gonna use these to essentially append a cube. And in that cube, I'm gonna select a, you know, like a weird thing. This one, I'm gonna use one of mine. Yeah, so that one, I'm gonna split on mask points, turn that cube off. And in fact, let's just take this bead and use the knife brush or the knife lasso. Just cut that there. So we now have some creepy hands that we can place just to complete the effect of this guy being creepy. You won't see much of it anyway. Mirror and weld. Let's push those leaves up a bit as well. All right, so that's just the fun part, just to wrap up this concept. But yeah, so I don't know if I would do something else, but I think that works overall. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys, because I do have to rush and get out of the house today. But let me see if there is some last-minute questions that I can help you with. The gravity settings with the cloud brush, yeah, those ones are really cool. Just in case you don't know, every brush, if you go to the brush palette, you can go to the depth, and then you have the gravity strength. So that is going to automatically, as you sculpt, pull things towards the, well, you can define the direction here, but towards the floor. So that's what CyberDark is talking about, I think. Yep. Bordelon from B5. Not sure what that is. Okay, cool. Awesome. So glad to hear that you enjoyed the stream, guys, and thanks for stopping by again. Same time in a couple of weeks we do that, and it's gonna be a longer, hopefully, or like a proper stream anyway. And we can start with a different project. I think I'm just gonna wrap this one up as it is. Maybe just add some final details to the head or something, and do a quick render just to share it. But that's it for today, guys. And again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.